Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Workout Wednesday. My name is Shannon Lindsay, and I'm going to take you through this week's challenge. This week, we are looking at the US Academy Awards data, and I thought we'd make one of these isotype charts where we can see the number of nominations per film. So, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once did really great this year. You can also see who the nominees are and what category they are nominated for. Another feature of this report is that you can search for, let's say we want only actor and actress. So we have a selection pane, and then over here we've got some dynamic text that shows which categories we're looking at. And still, again, Everything Everywhere All at Once comes in at the top. So let's take a look at this week's challenge and scroll down to the requirements and see what it is we're going to have to do. We are going to be getting data from a CSV this week. You can just download it. And then minimal data transformation. The only thing we need to do is to create a couple of measures and to really focus on the styling that we need for the report. We're then going to drop a couple of visuals onto the report, create our little selection pane using bookmarks and buttons, and then just one last check to make sure the report is accessible. Let's go ahead and jump into Power BI Desktop and get started. All right, here in Power BI, we're going to go ahead and get data. And we are going to go to text or CSV. It's a CSV file that I downloaded and saved locally. So we're going to go ahead and find it here. It is the Oscar Award. Per usual, we are going to click Transform Data. We never want to load the data without looking at it first. And we have really minimal transformation this week. All we're going to do is filter the data to include only 2023. And then we are also going to remove columns we don't need. So for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to go ahead and filter the year. And we're just going to go to the year equals 2023. This is actually quite a rich data set. So if we wanted to look at other years to see who did and did not win, we would want to leave this data in. But for now, we're only looking at who won this year. It's the 95th Oscars, or sorry, not who won, who's nominated. But I'm going to go ahead and actually remove the column winner, the column ceremony, and the year of the film column. It's really important to not keep columns that you don't need because it'll make your model much larger. It'll bloat the size of your model. So, and actually, technically, I could remove this year ceremony column as well. So let's go ahead and do that. We are then going to close and load, or sorry, close and apply, and make sure that all of these changes get loaded to the model. Now that our data is loaded, let's just take a look. It's really super simple. We've got 3 columns, 120 rows, so it's teeny tiny data. We've got our category, our name, and our film. The first thing I'm going to do is to create a new measure. And the measure that I'm going to create is just going to be for the number of nominations. And I am just going to do a really simple count. So I'm going to call this nominations. And we're going to do a count. And I'm just using here a field that I know is filled. If we had an ID or something like that, I might want to use that. But here, I'll just go ahead and go with category because I know that none of those are blank. And the reason that I'm making the measure so simple is because in my visualization, I'm looking by film. So this is going to count the number of rows that are filled for each film by category. The next measure that I'm going to create is going to be actually for the text box that shows you which category you have selected. Alrighty, so what we are looking at here is the selected category. So which value in the slicer did someone pick? And I am just creating a variable that's basically asking to concatenate the values if essentially if there's more than one category and separate it with a comma space. Let me just make this a little bigger here, easier to see. So if you want to just copy and paste this syntax, you can take it from the solution file. But otherwise, just feel free to take a look through this with me. So we're calculating and concatenating the categories so we can know what is selected, separating it by a comma space. We are saying if the category is filtered, give me back our first variable, which is the concatenated categories. Otherwise, give me back the words all award categories. So if there are no filters at all, that means we're looking at all of the categories. And then we're saying return the word for with a space and is it filtered, which is our second variable. So the reason that I'm doing it this way with the for in there is because I ended up using a shape rather than a text box just because it had better formatting abilities. Um, and you'll see that once we start building. So from here, the next thing that we need to do, our data is all ready. We've got our two measures, our data is all ready, making sure that gets saved. The next thing we need to do is to build out what we're going to be using for our background. And for this, I went to the actual Academy Awards website. I grabbed their logo and I also pulled down the outline of a statuette. And I'm going to show you how I create backgrounds using PowerPoint. Okay, we are here in PowerPoint. There are a lot of different tools you could use to make your backgrounds, but I like to use PowerPoint. It's just simple and it's familiar to me. So I pulled down the Oscars logo from their website. I then used a Chrome extension called What Font to find the font that was on the Oscars website and use it in this text here, the 2023 nominations. It's a little extra. You don't necessarily need to go that far. I also used a hamburger icon just from the insert tab of the ribbon here. Not sure what just happened there. Computer's catching up to me. And then finally, I found an image from the Oscars or Academy Awards website, and I used this little remove background feature. And essentially, I just wanted to get the outline of the statuette. So that's what I did. I removed the background. And then, really super simple, you just save this as an image, and then you can use it as your background in Power BI. Back here in Power BI, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to format my report page. I'm going to format the canvas background, and I'm going to select an image. Alrighty, so here I've got my slide one. Pardon the dog barking. There's something exciting happening outside. And one thing that you will notice when you add an image to your report, it automatically sets the transparency to 100%, which is not ideal. So let's move that down to 0 and you'll see that we have our background here. One nice thing about doing it this way is that you don't have to worry about spacing and budging things around here. It's untouchable. You can't mess it up. And from here, we are ready to build. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start adding visuals. The star of the show in this report is the Isotype visualization that we're going to use. I'm going to go ahead and just search for Infographic Designer. That's what this is. It is the Microsoft custom visual. We are going to select this, add it to the report, and it'll appear here. Just a quick note, if you want this to appear in all of your reports when you use Power BI Desktop, you can right-click the custom visual and you can pin it to the visualizations pane, just FYI. Alrighty, so what we're going to do is drop the infographic designer visual on the page. I am just going to shift this where I think I want it. And we need to add some data. So we are looking at the number of nominations, and our category is actually going to be film, because we're looking at the number of nominations by film. And the first thing you'll see here is that we get this column chart. We want to actually switch this to a bar chart. So we are going to, on the formatting pane, we're going to switch the chart type. Okay, we're a little bit closer. And now there's just a couple of quick formatting changes that we need to make. I'm going to turn the grid lines off. Those are a little bit distracting. I'm also going to turn the x-axis off. We're going to create a report page tooltip that shows you how many nominations a film has. So I don't find this necessary. You're welcome to keep it on if you want. I'm going to turn it off just to clean it up a little bit. And we're getting somewhere. The last thing I'm going to do is to turn the title off, which I believe is here. Okay, so we are super close. The next thing we need to do is click on the little edit, and I'm actually going to put this into focus mode so we can see it a little better. Okay, this is the cool part. So the next thing we're going to do is under the shape, there are a couple of different ways you can add a shape. You can add it from a URL, or you can upload, so you can upload a PNG or really, I think, any image type. When you do it from a URL, it has to be an SVG. Okay, and here we get our little statuette. I'm going to select the statuette, and now we need to do a little bit of formatting. So I am actually going to turn on multiple units so that we get one unit per one statuette per nomination, essentially, is what we want. But we need to do a little adjusting here. So we are doing the unit counts by row and column, and units per column is going to be 1. Next, I am going to just set the value color here. I got this hex color code from a Chrome add-in. You can also find it using the eyedropper tool in PowerPoint. And it does appear that something wild is going on here. It looks like maybe we have 3 statuettes per nomination. The mistake I made is we need to go back and do the unit count by amount and row. We need 1 amount per unit, so 1 statuette per unit, 1 unit per column, and then we're going to turn on keep ratio. What I did notice is that it makes the statuettes really super tiny. You can try using a different SVG to potentially get them a little bit bigger, but I was not successful with that. So this is what we're going with. We are now going to go back to the report. Just remove ourselves from focus mode there, get out of this edit mode. And you can see we are actually really quite close. We have 11 nominations for Everything Everywhere All at Once, so on and so forth. This is a scrollable list, so you can see everything that was nominated. The last thing we need to do here is I am going to turn the background off of this so that our statuette shows through and get my spacing here. The next thing I want to do is to create the shape where we include the selected category. We're also going to add the slicer and do a little bit of formatting. So let's do the slicer first, just so we can see what's going on here. And in the slicer, we are going to use category. I want to make this slicer a drop down. No, we're going to keep it as a vertical list. Sorry about that. But we are going to just add a search bar. I think that's really useful. In the sample, I put a shape behind this it was just a rectangle in gold. We're going to skip that for now, but I put a rectangle behind that. And now you can see that this works just fine. We do, however, want to change this to multi-select, the selection pane, just so that you get little check boxes so you can multi-select. And in the slicer header, I'm just going to add the text, select a category, and I'm going to update the font. And we'll go Sego UI Light. That's the closest to the Academy Award font that I could find. Next, we are going to add our shape that we are going to insert the measure that we used for the selected category. Again, the reason I'm using a shape is that it just is more flexible in the formatting style. There we go. We're going to go ahead and make this white, or you could turn it off, either one. And we're going to turn the border off. For the text, we're going to add text. Whoa. We're going to add text here. And we are going to use conditional formatting to add the field value based on the selected category. Okay, the next thing you should see is the measure should appear in this box, but you'll notice that the font color is white, so we're going to change that to our gold color. There we go. And now you can see that this is working. So you can finish doing any formatting you want to this. 12 is the minimum size font you're going to want. The reason that I selected a shape is because I want this aligned by the bottom. So if we select a bunch of award categories, it fills upward. And let's just test this to make sure our measure is working the way that we want it to. It is, in fact, and you can see that it is concatenating the list of values. It is bottom and left aligned. So this is what we wanted. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our bookmarks and buttons. The first thing that I am going to do is add a clear button over the hamburger. Remember, we did this hamburger in PowerPoint. You could also easily do it here in Power BI. You don't have to do it in PowerPoint. I just think that is the easiest way. So I'm going to cover it with a blank button so that when folks select this, it will prompt them with some text, and then it'll also pop open this kind of category menu item. So let's go ahead and turn this border off. And now we need to pause. We're going to make this point to a bookmark, but we don't have those set up yet. So on the View tab of the ribbon, we're going to turn on the bookmark pane and the selection pane. I always like to have these on when I'm building for a couple of different reasons. Number one, for the layer order. Number two, for the tab order to make this accessible. And then to build out your bookmarks. So this button, I'm just going to rename to call it the hamburger. You can call it whatever you want. And I am going to add my first bookmark. I'm going to call this bookmark the default view, so what people see when they land on the page. And what they're going to see when they land on the page is we want them to see the hamburger. We want them to see the shape, because that is our text that tells us which categories there are. And we want them to see nominations by film. We do not want them to see slicer. So I'm going to hide the slicer, and then I'm going to update this default bookmark. Update. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a second bookmark, and I am going to call this selection pane. You can, again, call it whatever you want. In this bookmark, I do want that slicer to be showing. And if you had another shape that you added behind this, just to have it formatted nicely, you would want to select that as well. I'm then going to update this. And now just toggle between the two to make sure that they look like what you want them to. We are missing one additional shape on here, and that is a back button so that people can make the selection pane go away. So I'm going to go back to the Insert tab of the ribbon. I'm going to insert another button, and I'm just going to use one of the inbuilt buttons. I'm going to use the back button, which is just an arrow. I'm going to position it where I want it. Directly over the hamburger. I am going to give it a background or a fill rather. That transparency defaults to 50%, so I'm going to bring that down. And then for the icon, I am going to change the color to make it match everything else. Last but not least, we're going to set the action here. We're going to make it a bookmark, and we're going to set it so that it goes back to the default view. All righty. So let's just test this out, make sure we did that right. So on our selection pane, we see the back arrow. On our default, we need to now hide this button. And you could rename this if you want. I'm not going to for now. I'm just going to hide that by clicking on the little eyeball. And then I'm going to update my default view. Okay, so we have our selection pane view. We have our default view. The final thing we need to do is what you can see is if we select a few different categories, and then we go back to the default view by pressing Control and using our new button, it changes the data back to what it was when we created this default view. And that is not what we want. We want people to be able to select something, to minimize the selection pane, and then to see what they just selected. So there's a really simple way to fix that. You just deselect data from both of your bookmarks. And this way, when you select a few categories, those remain. Alrighty, so that is it for this week's Workout Wednesday. I hope that you enjoyed the challenge. I'd love to see any creative designs. And as always, please join us next week for the next challenge. Thanks so much.